Hello.
Hey, Conn, how are you?
I'm doing great today.
Really?
We're coming to you Thursday for This Week in Blog. We're taping before the Sarah Palin debate tonight, so we will try to keep it off presidential politics, at least on 2008, as much as possible. But there still is lots of other stuff to talk about that is entirely relevant, including, first up, the bailout. I've been noticing a pretty serious, opposition on the left to the bailout. I see Duncan Black, Glenn Greenwald, Digby, Marcos, the Open Left crowd, Serrata, Matt Stoller, Chris Bowers, Jerome Armstrong. They're all heavily against this, and I think you're on that list too. Why? What's your beef?
Well, let me. I'm always a little more complicated than most people, and this is no exception. I was for the original House bailout bill that was presented that got voted down, because to me that addressed what needed to be done at this time, which was deal with the current credit mortgage crisis, provide liquidity to the credit markets. It was, as everyone else, I'm angry about it. I'm upset we have to do it, but I thought it was necessary.
You mean the first one, the one the House Republicans voted down on Monday?
Yes, and I'm glad you accepted the House Republicans voted it down, because a lot of people were trying to say that it was a bipartisan rejection, which I guess is actually the Stoller, Marcos, Aravosis, whoever else is on the list you just listed as position.
Yeah, no. Bowers had a post up pretty much immediately after that, calling it a great bipartisan victory.
Yeah,
that the coalition of the far left and far right, although those weren't his terms, came together to reject it. Kind of a populist thing.
Right.
I don't think there's zero there. I think it was a kind of interesting coalition that came together. But it definitely was the load was carried by the Republicans in rejecting it on Monday.
Yeah, I think the more interesting part about it is, though, you can't call it a coalition because they rejected it for different reasons. At least
very different reasons.
That doesn't make it a coalition. I mean, here's my. I would have, if it was my bill to write, I would have said, let's look hard at helping homeowners. Let's not lard it on with the stimulus package or frankly, this is where I got off the train was with what the Senate did. And what I believe what the Senate did was just wrong. We have an immediate crisis that we can't take a good long time to study. At least I think that's true. I don't think Paulson's making that up. I don't think Bernanke's making it up. I accept there is a real credit crunch and it poses a real threat. To me, then let's address that problem. I thought Paulson's bill was inadequate. I thought Dodd had some good additions. I'm not a big believer in the Republican idea of this insurance, but hey, doesn't hurt. Throw it in there.
Yeah, well, the insurance had no teeth. It was like an option. It was like, dear Paulson, please also do this.
Right.
There was nothing in the plan that would make him do it. It was
I think Paulson didn't believe.
Yeah,
I think Paulson didn't believe in it. But let's assume it had teeth or it didn't. All of those things, to me, seem to be reasonable ideas for addressing the immediate crisis. We're 30 days from an election. This isn't the time to get unscored tax cuts for whoever they're for. I know the AMT, that's supposed to be a middle-class initiative, and Democrats like it, and it's a Democratic piece. This isn't the time for that. This isn't the time for rum excise tax extensions in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. This isn't the time for wood and arrows. You address the problem that everyone says is a crisis, and that's what you do, because we're working in a hurry. And I accept the idea that it's a crisis. The Senate bill became a 450-page monstrosity. What happened? I thought we had a crisis. In a crisis, you deal with the crisis. You don't put together a wish list. I remember Chuck Schumer, when he was talking about it, said, we're not going to Christmas tree this. I don't know if you remember that phrase. Jesus.
No, I remember when everything, the conversation first started, that was his line.
Right. And what did we end up with? We ended up with the Rockefeller Center tree. I mean, this is unbelievable. So I hate that
It's
bill.
not that unbelievable.
Well, I guess I should have expected it, but I really thought, everyone said it was a crisis. So I was for the bailout bill because I thought the House bill, the original House bill, I don't like what happened with the Senate bill. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen now with the House Republicans, who in my mind would have every right to say this is ridiculous. You said we had a crisis, and then you're going to put all these other good Democratic and earmarked goodies in here. This is crazy. Seems to me that more than ever, the Republican position of being against it is stronger than it ever was. But all that said, I guess I still hate it, but I still think we need it. So we got to do it. So I do defer from my well, they're not exactly my brethren anymore because we fight so much, but my Democratic cohorts on this bailout bill. I think that they're just plain wrong. This is a real crisis, and we need a short-term solution. And I think that what we have before us, at least on the crisis part, is fair enough that I can live with it for now, and then we can see what needs to be done to it if it doesn't work in 2 or 3 months. My real concern, to go back to my original point, is it solves a short-term crisis, but the long-term problem is the housing bubble has crashed. 6 million.
Right, and I think that's what most of let me just do a quick review of the rightosphere before we move to the left substance critique, because there was definitely still more of a split on the right. Not so many of the bigwigs all signing up against. You had Michelle Malkin definitely against and actively so.
Yeah.
Then you had Town Hall and Amanda Carpenter kind of against, but not really. They would post maybe once a day, kind of against, but they weren't whipping it like Michelle was. And then you had the people on the corner, the bigwigs there, Lowry, Rich Lowry for, Kudlow for, Jim Manzi for, them kind of more actively. And then you had Catherine Jean Lopez, who runs the corner, who had a post that was kind of favorable. Powerline was for, but then you also had dissenters on the post like Ian Murray. But kind of most of the kind of more establishment were for it, while you had more of the Malkin muckrakers against it. So more of a divide and an interesting divide at that. But after it went down on Monday, there was a a moment, it seemed, especially that the left was pushing the Duncans, the Digbees, the Marcoses, especially the Chris and Matt, for a progressive fix to it. And I guess I want to know what your reaction is to that, because it seems to me you're saying you are for a very limited short-term fix, but also you've also been posting about your support of Hillary Clinton's plan of also addressing the housing prices.
Well, that's what that's the fix I've always wanted, and I would have loved to have seen that.
But is
in
that
the
more
bill.
of a long-term fix?
Pardon me?
What would your ideal bill be?
My ideal bill now would be would be address the immediate liquidity credit crisis, the bank-to-bank situation, the TED spread, create some confidence in the market. And that's in the bill, I thought. And I thought the House bill, and to be fair, the Senate bill didn't take that out. It just added 300 pages of extraneous, not extraneous, and it may even be important things. I mean, I'm not saying I'm against everything that's in those 300 pages. I just don't think that when you're dealing with a crisis piece of legislation, that's the way to address it. My ideal bill would have dealt with the credit mortgage crisis, which would have contained the injection of federal money to help the banks deal with this, illiquid assets, as Paulson put it. And I would have at the same time have said that we also, and maybe this was too ambitious, but I would have liked to have seen an expansion of the idea of the homeowners loan corporation, so that
like the one that we had in the New Deal,
right, so that we would recognize that that's the underlying problem, that this piece of legislation recognizes that's the underlying problem, and indeed this legislation would have said we are going to earmark or earmarked, that's a bad word for it. We're going to talk about spending, hundreds of billions of dollars with those distressed assets and taking them and pushing them into a homeowners loan corporation type entity that would then create new and more acceptable and feasible mortgage terms for the homeowner. Because at the end of the day, we can save them now, but if there's 6 million foreclosures next year, we're going to be right back where we started. So the underlying problem has not been addressed. And today I wrote about Barack Obama and a speech he gave in La Crosse, Wisconsin yesterday. And it's, from my perspective as a Democrat, I think he hits a lot of the high points. And what bothered me about it was his speech does not deal with the homeowner crisis, the mortgage foreclosure crisis. It doesn't. It sort of mentions it in passing when it is a central part of the problem. And it's not like these ideas aren't out there and people aren't talking about them. Yes, Hillary Clinton's been a very prominent supporter, but she's not the only one. There are other Democrats who have been pushing this issue, and Obama's not getting behind it. And as a Democrat, that bothers me a lot. And I'm curious, from the Republican perspective, if someone doesn't think that creates a bit of an opportunity for McCain, and to me, this is not moving to the left of Obama on the issue. To me, this is moving towards the average American on the people. McCain, I thought, bungled the way he played it, and I think this almost gives him a second chance. He could become a champion of homeowners. I think he could really regain some footing here. I know that's a political analysis, but I don't know that really offends Republican ideals either, other than, the idea of free market and up by your bootstraps in the most caricatured way. But, that's not necessarily all Republicans are about. They are also, at least some Republicans there's a populist streak, and they want to help the people, not Wall Street. So
yeah, and that definitely did exist with McCain. But I mean, David Brooks had an op-ed, last week or the week before, talking about why he was disappointed with the McCain campaign, and it wasn't because of the negative tax ads and everything else. It's because McCain never articulated a kind of a coherent philosophy. And I think he's paying for that with this mortgage crisis. Is that on the one hand he talks about how great the free market is and everything else, and free trade and tax cuts and all that stuff, but then he turns around and talks about how wonderful regulation is and how we need more regulation. And there's just been a disconnect that hasn't allowed him to have a firm message on the issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right, and I know we weren't going to get into presidential politics, but I'm going to just take an aside here about McCain. I've never been a fan of his, but what's most interesting to me is exactly that. He never decided on a narrative of his own. He liked the word maverick, and he seemed to believe that was enough. But he never tied it to what were people's concerns. And it always struck me that I thought, you brought in Schmidt, that made sense. You wanted to make the election about Obama and whether he's ready or not, and that's politics. But on the McCain part of the story, it seemed to me he never found a way to connect his Maverick story, which is very popular in Washington, and was. Now with Obama being the darling of the media, that McCain must be shocked to heck that he gets treated the way he's treated now. But he never, to me, gave a coherent narrative of what he was and what he was about, how that connected to the concerns of the voters in this election, and if there was a mistake, that was the biggest one. I know a lot of people are talking about Palin, but I think Palin actually at the time was a very good gamble for him.
We can get to Palin in a second, but sticking with Obama in this past 2 weeks in this crisis, what do you think this kind of has previewed about his administration, his priorities? Because already he's at least admitted that he's going to have to phase in some of his other priorities as far as spending and tax cuts for the middle class. What do you What data points do you think this we're using this data point? What do you think this past 2 weeks tells you about how Obama's going to govern?
Obama remains a bit of a cipher, and I would love to say that he was listened to. He certainly sounds more democratic. He's much more partisan. He's much more about what a lot of us think the Democratic Party should be and should be about. And he's talked that way. And,
yeah, I'm just thinking of, because you have a long history of posts trying to cast a new kind of FDR image for him, and it seems like at each point Obama kind of fails you on that, including these past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I thought he wanted to project. I think he thought there was a real crisis, and he thought something needed to be done. And I think that he did not. I think there is a charitable interpretation of what he did, and there's an uncharitable one. The charitable interpretation would be that he really didn't want to inject presidential politics into this situation because he thought we really needed to solve the problem, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so we're all adults here, so what's the uncharitable one?
The uncharitable one is that he knew that the crisis was a real problem for Republicans generally and for McCain specifically, and he wanted to just not get in the way. And just he wanted to follow the Carville adage he did not follow the Carville adage of when your opponents sink and throw them an anvil. He just let them sink. He let it go.
Right.
He said McCain's sinking on his own, and let's be clear. And I've said this, and I don't know what other people think, but I know what I think. 2 Mondays ago, when John McCain said the fundamentals of the economy are fundamentally strong, or rather are strong, that killed him. I think that set the tone.
I don't know if that killed him. I think the gambit killed him. I think the suspending the campaign. I'm going to go to Washington, get this done. Then that meeting blows up. Then he goes to the debate anyways. Then the House Republicans that he said he was going to bring on board voted. I think that weak frame right there.
Well,
nothing's good in that whole week for McCain.
I agree. He compounded it later on, but I think that was the beginning of it. And I think what you can't unconnect. It was a bit of a chain reaction. He got in trouble with that statement on Monday. So he felt he had to do something drastic on Wednesday, Thursday, and that's why the whole suspending my campaign thing came from, it seems to me, which was really, I thought, a bad play for 2 reasons. And maybe the McCain couldn't accept it yet, or maybe he hasn't, or maybe some of his people hadn't accepted it yet. The media is against him. He's never had the media against him in his political career that I can think of. The media is against him, and he hasn't figured that out. Well, he figured it out, but it seemed like he didn't believe it.
He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have a plan B.
Because Republicans historically have been wonderful running against the media. Very effective, and back in the 80s with merit. And they've always known how to do that. John McCain, it's funny because Conn, John McCain is not the conservative Republicans' favorite politician. It's never been.
Still's not.
Probably still isn't. I'm sure he's the lesser of 2 evils still today. And I think part of it was that they said, you're playing footsie with these people who have had it in for us forever. You're playing Mr. Maverick, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do that. So it's funny. John McCain, he called them himself my base. His base was the media for years. And it's taken a long time, maybe not even yet, has it sunk in, The media is all in for Obama in this election. You know that, Conn. I think you know that.
I have plenty of friends in the media. I say it all the time. You of course were kind of polling for Hillary, and you saw it at work. Chris Matthews is weak in the knees for the guy, and he's just I guess honest enough to admit it.
I respect Hillary, and Hillary gained my admiration by the way she campaigned, and I think she's become a very, very good politician, and she's a very smart woman. I didn't think on policy there was that much difference between them, and I actually, people will for some reason, do not take me at face value when I say this. I don't know why. I thought Obama was the better choice for Democrats precisely because the media was going to be in his corner. And I think I've been proven right. They were saying, not when the response I would get was, well, just wait till he sees McCain. You know how they love McCain. I said, I'm telling you guys, it's different. They love Obama. They love Obama to death, and they will not turn on him. And they just haven't. I mean, they you know.
Well, speaking of biases in the press, I did think we should mention, and I wanted to get your take on the Gwen Ifill book deal controversy. For those Blogging Heads viewers who haven't heard about it, although I'm sure most of you have, Gwen Ifill has a book coming out, conveniently scheduled to be published on Inauguration Day, whoever's getting inaugurated that day. And the book is called The Breakthrough, Politics and Race in the Age of Obama. And so, of course, Michelle Malkin and the usual everyone at the corner is up in arms over this. And the Columbia Journalism Review even said that there's a conflict of interest here. Their line is that it stands to reason that a book with such a title would sell better if a certain person is inaugurated on that day. So, do you think this is a real conflict of interest or a fake issue?
I think it's a real conflict of interest. I don't see how Gwen Ifill can possibly be moderating this debate.
But it's going to happen in a couple hours.
I know. I'm shocked. And what I read today was that she did not tell the debate commission about the book.
She did not. Conveniently left it out.
I think it's an outrageous thing she did. I think that the right-wing bloggers, Malkin on down, and are absolutely right. Imagine how we would be if it had been. Someone gave a good example, John Stossel. If John Stossel was, or pick anybody you want, was writing a book.
John Stossel, it's hard to pick because no one's ever going to say Rush or Hugh, but John's a good figure to pick because he has a somewhat an investigative.
Yeah, he had a history as an investigative reporter, right?
Right. But he's also a hardcore libertarian who is pretty much on our side.
Exactly.
So yeah, John would be a good pick.
I think when I heard about it, I said I can't believe it. I really can't believe it. You can't. She should not be moderating this debate. It's that simple.
Let me offer a limited defense of Gwen. First of all, I'm a big Gwen Ifill fan. My idea of a good Friday night is a bottle of wine and Washington Weekly in Review with Gwen moderating.
Really?
But on the corner, Jay Nordlinger had a good post. He wrote, years ago, some Bolshie Dem, I think it was Ron Dellums, was rising to some important committee position, and Henry Hyde was asked by some righty, no doubt, don't you think he's a security risk? And Hyde answered blithely, no more than any other Democrat. So then Jay writes, McCarthyite, funny, resigned. Anyway, I thought of Hyde's remark this morning when people say, well, isn't Gwen Ifill pro-Obama? And the answer is, if she is no more so than any other suitable MSM big. So at any rate, no pouting or fretting, play on. And that was my immediate reaction is, I like Gwen. I think she's fair and professional. And it's like, she's no worse than anyone else.
That's a heck of a defense there. Let me full disclosure. I don't like Gwen Ifill.
Oh.
I think she can be very good. I think she lets her personal feelings get in the way a lot in her coverage, and I think there's two things going on. Number one, I think the outrage is genuine. Number two, I think you want to make sure Gwen Ifill plays it straight. You complain before the debate. So perhaps her performance will be unusually fair. So
well, let me just say this: I was very sympathetic to Gwen until I saw this quote from the AP in the corner. This is from the AP story. Ifill questions why people assume that her book would be favorable towards Obama. Quote: do you think that they made assumptions about Lou Cannon, who was white, when he wrote his book about Reagan? Said Ifill, who was black.
Oh my God! Did she really say that?
She really said that. asked if there were racial motives at play, she said, "I don't know what it is. I find it curious." And then Jonah Goldberg comments, "Do I think the story is being overplayed? Yeah, probably. But I think the debate organizers deserve more criticism than Eiffel, who I generally think is more fair than most, but I can really do without the race card." And so could I. I mean, I like Gwen, and I saw that quote and I was like, wow, I am now on Michelle Malkin's side. This is just absolutely outrageous.
I'm as politically correct as anybody on racism and sexism. I mean, people think I'm ridiculous with it. And it never occurred to me as a race issue. Here's the way I thought the conflict was. She's going to make a lot more money if Obama wins.
Right. It's hard to talk about the age of Obama when President McCain's being sworn in.
I mean, that book will be pretty much, imagine on Inauguration Day, and it's President McCain. The age of Obama ended on November 4th. And let's be clear, by the way, here's a segue for you. If Barack Obama loses this election, he will never be a national candidate again, because this is an election that a Democrat cannot lose.
I agree.
And that's it's an unlosable election for a competent campaign. And Obama's been very. Let me give David Axelrod all the credit in the world, particularly in his primary strategy. He and Fluff, they knew what they were doing. They knew there was going to be a long road. They played it well. They played their card well. They beat a very, very formidable opponent. So they get all the credit in the world. But now that they're in the general election, there's just no way that any Democrat should lose this election, period. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you see this differently. I see 30 days to go. I do not know what McCain can do to win this election.
I agree. But before we move on to 2012, I just wanted to touch on Sarah Palin a little bit, mostly because she sparked a debate on the right that I think you're familiar with.
There's been a debate at my website, TalkLeft, about Sarah Palin.
But this is less about Sarah Palin than is about dissent and blogs.
It's all those things. Yeah.
Well, anyways, Kathleen Parker had an article out kind of doubting Sarah Palin and saying that she might want to step off the ticket. And Catherine Jean Lopez had an article also on National Review that was more supportive of Palin, but also critical of how she'd been handled by the McCain camp so far. And so then there was also a flurry of other blogs, including a new one called Cultural 11, which is kind of run by Steve Forbes and Bill Bennett. And after the Cultural 11 anti-Palin piece ran, Eric Erickson, who runs Red State, had a post up basically condemning all the people that were talking bad about Palin. And
Eric gets that way sometimes.
Yeah, well, this is a gem. This is Eric. Some people are on the team, some people are not on the team. Some people want you to know they're conservatives first and Republicans second. And by God, let me pee on the GOP just so you know how far apart I am if I play willing and nilly the unfair media narrative against Sarah Palin. These are the days when I think we deserve to lose, and this is one of them. It's all great to say you are conservative first, but at the end of the day, there are only two teams playing on November 4th. Pick one. I guess Culture 11 has chosen Obama. So then this led Ross Douthat to reply. Sometimes conservatives like to say that the great thing about the American right is its vibrant internal debates. It's tolerant for free play of ideas, its disinterest in rigid ideologies and inflexible party lines. Sometimes this is true, sometimes though it isn't. Just ask Kathleen Parker. The irony is that Eric Erickson no doubt really and truly believes that by blacklisting any conservative writer or website that isn't sufficiently on side, he's doing what it takes to rebuild a conservative majority, when the reality, of course, is precisely the reverse. And so when I was reading this, I kind of thought of you because I know you've taken a lot of heat for your anti-Obama writings. And I do think there is an element, that a lot of bloggers feel as to, how much criticism should I be criticizing my own team members.
There was interesting little interchange that you probably missed because it was sort of inside left blog baseball between Bob Summerby of the Daily Howler and Duncan Black of Etchiton, where Summerby basically questioned some of what things that Atrios was writing about a debate, the first debate, when he didn't see the debate. I thought the criticism was fair. And whether it was fair or not, I've had my own disagreements, serious ones, with Bob Summerby. But I am one of these guys. You can't give up your own intellectual integrity. I mean, you have to say what you think within parameters, of course. I mean, we all pull punches a little bit, or a lot of bit. But sometimes you got to say what you think on some level. And particularly, I think Eric's point is right, but his prescription is wrong. He says he's fighting for conservatism, and yet he wants to silence people who disagree with republicanism. So it was kind of weird, because Kathleen Parker didn't say she's insufficiently conservative or something like that. I mean, whether Kathleen Parker's right or wrong, and I'll give you full disclosure.
That's kind of irrelevant to the question. I mean, you can talk about tone, but I don't think the tone was bad. I mean, she wasn't talking about Sarah Palin's kids or anything. I mean, it wasn't like she was, going all Andrew Sullivan on.
No, she said that she didn't think she was qualified to be vice president. As I understood, I didn't read I have to be honest, I did not read Kathleen Parker's column. I heard about it. I read about what other people read about it. I've never been a big Kathleen Parker fan myself, so what she has to say about things doesn't mean that much to me. I know it caused a stir over there because it provided for the even conservative Kathleen Parker moment.
Right. Well, I was going to kind of segue into that. Is that there is that nature of when you do criticize someone from your own team, you do allow for a narrative to form, and that's the new interest, the new nature of the blogs, is that these discussions that were on some level internal before, are now in a situation where the other side can read your mail. So for example,
go ahead, Clarence.
So for example, Steve Hayward wrote at the corner. So I'm flipping channels, and I happened upon MSNBC's new Rachel Maddow show, and she's doing a segment on conservatives who have turned against Palin: David Frum, Charles Krauthammer, David Brooks, etc. And much to my surprise, there was my photo and my name misspelled, as being, among other things, conservatives on the list. I must have missed this article. Have I been sniffing too much glue? When did I do this? I'm wondering how to register a complaint with MSNBC. Probably a waste of time, given how far gone they are. But it just shows that when you do criticize your own team, it automatically fits into a narrative that the Keith Olbermans and Rach Maddows of the world will pick up on.
Well, let's think about that for a second, because I was told about I was accused of some of the same stuff. So let me first disassociate myself with Kathleen Parker's assessment of Palin, because I have a completely.
You have to read the article. Forget Kathleen Parker. We're talking about the larger issue of criticizing teammates.
The larger issue. As you know, I criticized Barack Obama for years.
I've read some of those posts.
Yes, I mean, for years I've criticized him. My criticisms are he is not democratic enough, he's not partisan enough, he's not left enough, he doesn't fight enough. Now, sometimes those posts are used or are of interest to people on the right, wondering, "Ooh, look at there's people's dissension on the Democratic side."
Right.
And here's my response to all of these to these things always, because a lot of people get mad at me. I say, let me tell you something. Pauls are Pauls, and they do what they do. What I care about is the issues I care about and what can be done to forward them. I'm going to be for Barack Obama in this election. Of course I am, because John McCain is anathema to what I believe in. But I want Barack Obama to be more like more in tune with what I believe in, and I want Barack Obama to be fighting in a way that I think is effective, and I'm going to say what I think. Of course, I'm not at Daily Kos anymore, so what I write isn't, it's easier for me now. Let's put it to you this way, and maybe that's part of a freedom I now have that I didn't.
So you're saying there is a bit of the Eric Erickson squelching of dissent at the Daily Kos, at the Orange Monster.
I don't know for a fact, and frankly, Marcos Melitas will write what he thinks no matter what, and I'll say that all the time. It's just sometimes what he thinks it doesn't always jive with reality. In my point,
right? But what you just said is that you feel more free at TalkLeft than you did at Daily Kos.
Oh, no question about it. At Daily Kos, I would have felt like I was having to play for the Democratic Party team all the time, and I think there's something to it. I mean, here's the way I think of it, and maybe it's wrong. Daily Kos is a Democratic Party blog. It's not. It's sure they're progressive, but they're less about issues than they are about the Democratic Party winning elections. And when you sort of give yourself that mission statement, then you live with it. And I think it's a fair way to read it. I know sometimes they'll revolt on an issue here. They'll get mad about FISA. But
by and large, bailout, for example.
Yeah, and the bailout. But the prism is largely about getting Democrats elected. And that's a great role, and there's a place for it in the blogs. But you're sort of that's what you are, and that's where you're more prone. I don't think I get cited so much for criticizing Obama. It's old hat now. I criticized him today. I don't think anybody cares. Because there he goes again is probably the idea, and that's fine because there he goes again means yes. But then if someone talks about Hulk and whether it's a good idea, that would be my point to it. But I strayed from your philosophical point. Is there your team, my team on the left? Of course there is. I never was on this town hall email list. I never wanted to be for a lot of these reasons. And I'm sure there's comparable discussions going on with the right blogs about what's going to work and what we're mad about and what we should talk about and how we should approach it. You're 30 days from an election. If I can understand Eric's peak, he's 30 days from an election. Squelching dissent 30 days from an election is being a party man. And you know what? At this point, I'm a bit of a party man too. I spend a lot more time talking about what I don't like about McCain than what I don't like about Obama now. That's the reality. I don't blog about Charlie Rangel's tax problems because I love Charlie. First of all, I love Charlie Rangel. He's one of my favorite people in the whole world. But second of all, because we're about it's an election thing. So yeah, I think there's a filter there. It's not right. I try to avoid it as much as possible. I try to be as honest as possible.
I think your point that there are different blogs, different purposes, and of course there's different times for different things, and so a Think Progress isn't going to be introspectively criticizing the Democratic Party the way Open Left will. They're just have different purposes.
Yeah, I guess so. But let me tell you. You're right, but let me tell you, in the primaries, the right blogs were much better than the left blogs. They were much more issue-oriented. They hated McCain, sure, but it wasn't like attack McCain just because they hate McCain. It was...
Well, to defend the left, there was a lot more philosophical disagreement among the right's candidates than there was between Obama and Hillary.
Fair enough. But that's actually, that's a defense, but also... you'd have to explain then why so much hostility towards Hillary as opposed to Obama if there really wasn't that much difference between them in terms of ideology.
Well, I think that's a whole book.
It is a whole book. I may write it.
So if we can just quickly talk about 2012, since some of us think the elections are a foregone conclusion. Mark Amador, who is a former colleague of mine at the Hotline, always thinking ahead, was trying to decide who the front runner was going to be in 2012, and he picks Huckabee. His analysis: most importantly, Huckabee has fewer ties to the GOP establishment than Romney. The same autophagic establishment that is getting the blame for the 8 years of messiness. Now, Huckabee's biggest challenge comes not from Governor Romney at the outset. His populist economic policies will be challenged by the Pinch-Shadegg axis of the party, although I wouldn't be surprised the two reconcile and Huckabee moves to center-right on government, positions himself squarely within the Douthoutian, Salamian, pro-family economic moral suasion wing of the party that currently resides in 7th floor of the Watergate building. But then he goes on and says Newt Gingrich is a possibility, and Matt Lewis over at Town Hall picked up on Amber's post and threw in Sarah Palin's name as well as Bobby Jindal. So with that field, that very early 2012 field, Huckabee, we'll keep Romney in there, Newt Gingrich, Sarah Palin, and Bobby Jindal. Who do you fear the most? Who do you fear the least?
First of all, to not jinx my candidate, Barack Obama, I'm going to say that if Obama loses in 2008, the absolute lock for the nomination in 2012 for the Democrats will be Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Okay, let's stipulate that.
That aside, if what I believe will happen, Barack Obama becomes president, who will he face in the 2012 election? My own view is that the economy will probably still be perhaps the most important issue, that Republican voters will perceive the need for economic competence, ability, image to be incredibly important.
Someone who's not on record saying they don't understand the economy.
Right. And
Preferably.
Someone who's already made his inroads and his ties to the social conservatives. He's made his moves already. He's moved away from his past socially moderate positions, can thread that needle very well, and obviously I'm describing Mitt Romney to you.
Right.
So I believe Mitt Romney would be the favorite for the 2012 Republican nomination.
Now, would that be the nominee you fear the most, or that you would most like the Republicans to pick?
I would fear Mitt Romney the most. I think Mitt Romney got the worst shake of any candidate other than Hillary Clinton in the primaries from the press. Mitt Romney, to me, won almost every Republican debate.
Let me first confess that I was a Mitt Romney fan, and I was pulling for him most of the way, right up until kind of pre-debate when he was up in Mackinac Island up in Michigan, and he'd already have a couple of lines, but he made the speech where he talked about the importance, the real importance of putting in God we trust on the currency. And first of all, it's already there, and second of all, this is just not the most pressing issue of our day. And it became clear to me through that, and of course there are other many issues, instances which are not immediately come to me, that at some point along the way, some consultant succeeded in convincing Mitt Romney that he needed to run as George Allen in order to win the GOP nomination. George Allen being Go ahead.
Do you think they were wrong?
I think they were deadly wrong.
Really?
I think they totally misread the political situation. And when Romney threw that off, when Romney became the hands-on manager of the economy and put all that social conservatism that is great and works great for Huckabee, but is just not who Romney is. When you put that aside, he had a brief little flash and did well in Michigan and had a couple good weeks. But it was that whole beginning part of it when he was trying to be someone who he wasn't that I think is still going to haunt him in 2012.
That's an interesting point. I guess you're right. I didn't follow that closely. I thought I would have thought what he thought, that he really needed to make a big reach to the social conservative base. He had a history of socially moderate positions, or to social conservatives liberal positions. So I thought he really felt he needed to go the extra mile. I would have thought he needed to go the extra mile. And it's funny. I thought Mitt Romney lost the nomination when John McCain spent 4 days lying about him, and the media let him get away with it in Florida about Iraq. I think that cost him the election. That and Charlie Crist moving in for McCain.
Yeah, but there are all other,
if Romney wins Florida,
Romney's in trouble with. I mean, Florida.
But if Romney wins Florida, if Romney wins Florida, do you think he would have been the nominee?
It helps. It definitely helps. But Giuliani was still in the race at the time. I mean, Florida's Giuliani's deathbed.
He was dead.
Yeah, if he would have pulled that out, it would have been longer.
That's interesting. I thought that decided it. I really thought Mitt Romney wins Florida, he wins the whole thing, because he would have put all the money he needed to win it. And McCain, with his bubble, would have burst. And let's face it, who on the Republican side really likes McCain? This is, we didn't get around to evaluating the Sarah Palin pick in this call, but I still marvel at the fact that someone thinks that McCain. I would have picked Romney if I was McCain, but I think his choice of Palin made a lot of sense. Jesus Christ, excuse my blasphemy there. John McCain is not a figure that the base of the Republican Party cares about or likes.
It's true. It's true. Well, you can still include Sarah because no matter even if she loses with McCain at the top of the ticket, of course it depends how she does in the debates and from here on out. But she's definitely going to be in the mix for 2012.
Well, I think whether Sarah Palin will ever be presidential material or not will be decided tonight.
Probably. So we'll know by the time this airs.
I believe so. If she does, by the way, we haven't talked about predictions. I predict she's going to do well tonight. I think she's going to do well.
I'm too emotionally invested. I'm a big fan. I thought she was going to not do well at the convention, and I was wrong. She did great, and I'm very nervous about tonight.
I think this is another one of those convention moments. Have you seen obviously you've seen clips of her debates in Alaska.
I do. I know. I'm a big fan. It's just from the convention till now. It's I think Catherine Lopez is right. It just seems the McCain campaign has encapsulated this from her bubble and not let Sarah be Sarah.
There's two things they've done wrong. Number one, they worried too much about what people were saying about her. And I wrote today about I called it the Sarah Palin effect. And I said, Sarah Palin, and you'll like this, I think, the politician she reminds me the most of, people like to say Dan Quayle. No. Dan Quayle did not have an ounce of political skill in his body. I mean, he was, let's face it, he was what he was by the connections of who he knew.
And he disappeared very quickly.
And because he had no political talent. Sarah Palin reminds me of Ronald Reagan. And if they had let her run here's the thing, I guess for vice president it's hard to have a Ronald Reagan type. When she talks in her broad general themes and lets herself out, people find that appealing. And what happened for 2 weeks? The McCain campaign seemed to get cowed and frightened by the media saying, "Oh, you did this. Oh, you said that." My God, the Ronald Reagan campaign would never have cared a word about what they said. Do you remember the famous story with Leslie Stahl piece in 1984?
Right. As long as the pictures are good.
As long as the pictures are good. Whenever Sarah Palin's talking about something that shows her to be an ordinary American, which she really conveys incredibly well, the fact that in the background somebody's saying something bad about her doesn't matter. It's interesting.
I agree. They got her out of her comfort zone, and they should have been telling her up front, just answer things honestly and be yourself. Instead, they tried to script her, and it just didn't turn out well. The same way it didn't turn out well for Romney.
Yeah, but what happens if she does well tonight? What happens if she does well tonight? Think about this. As I said, here's the thing. We've got it all set up. Sarah Palin is, according to the media and according to the left blogs, the most unfittest person ever to run for anything in the history of everything. And you know what? She isn't. She's not experienced. She's not particularly qualified. But you know what? When my candidate's only been in the Senate for 4 years, that's not something I would talk about that much. But apparently it's okay. We get to talk about it. And she goes out there and she appeals to the American people again. Remember, let's not forget the bump you got out of the Republican convention. And you know what? It wasn't because of John McCain's great speech.
No, it wasn't.
Okay? So I tell you guys, we're setting ourselves up. If there's one way that McCain can get back in this race, if Palin has a huge night, just a huge night. Biden's not going to screw up, by the way. There's no way he's going to condescend to her. He's not going to do that. That's the one thing.
He doesn't play small ball.
So he's going to be a non-entity, really, and that's the right play. But suppose Palin has a big night, and then 5 days from now, McCain gets another crack at it. Then people are excited again in the Republican side.
Yeah, because no one watched last Friday.
I know. But if Palin has a good night and gets it back going, and then you got another debate in 5 days. Sure, it's a town hall. It's this. If McCain has a good night, and all of a sudden it's tightening again, then you put this thing in risk. I think the fundamentals are so bad that it's almost virtually impossible. But these 5 days are actually the chance. And the reason why McCain has a chance is this. We've made Sarah Palin an issue. And we, meaning Democrats and our allies in the media, have made Sarah Palin an issue when we really want the economy and George Bush to be the issues in this campaign, not Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin can still bounce back on us. What the American people think of her.
The economy and George Bush are not.
They're said not in 30 days or not.
No.
George Bush, I don't know. There might be some historian who will write a revisionist story in 30 years, but not in 30 days. Sarah Palin can change her story tonight. That's all it's going to take. One good night, and all of a sudden, boy, the media was mean to her. They were really wrong about her.
Well, everyone watching this already knows, so we'll go ahead and leave it there.
That's true. But I predict she'll have a good night. So you'll either look like the idiot I am or like the genius I'm not.
Okay. Well, hope to have you back soon, Armando.
Hey, this was great, Conn. Let's do it again.